In the hushed tension of the courtroom, where the weight of finality hung heavy, Sarah leaned back with a smug grin as her soon-to-be ex-husband, Mark, signed the divorce papers. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Finally free from your broke ass." But her mockery shattered when the judge cleared his throat and announced Mark's true net worth aloud. Over $100 million, turning her triumph into utter disbelief. Mark had always been the quiet type, the kind of man who showed up every day without fanfare. He worked long hours at what Sarah assumed was a dead-end job in tech consulting, coming home to their modest apartment with takeout and tired eyes. She had met him 10 years ago at a coffee shop in Seattle, where he spilled his latte on her laptop and offered to replace it on the spot. Back then, she thought he was charming in a simple way, reliable, unassuming. They dated for a year before he proposed with a modest ring that she later complained about to her friends. "It's sweet, but come on, where's the sparkle?" she'd say, laughing it off. Their marriage started strong. Mark supported her through her career in marketing, encouraging her to take risks and climb the ladder at her firm. He cooked dinners when she worked late, handled the bills without complaint, and never once raised his voice in arguments. But over time, Sarah grew restless. She wanted more: the vacations to Europe, the designer clothes, the house with a view. Mark's salary, as far as she knew, barely covered their rent and groceries. "Why can't we afford better?" she'd nag. "All my friends are living up, and we're stuck here like losers." Mark would just nod and say, "We're building something real, Sarah. Money isn't everything." She rolled her eyes at that. To her, money was the key to happiness, and Mark's lack of ambition grated on her. She started staying out later, meeting friends for drinks, and eventually she met Alex. Alex was everything Mark wasn't: flashy, successful, with a sports car and stories of yacht parties. Their affair began innocently enough, a flirtation at a work event. But it escalated quickly. Sarah justified it to herself. Mark didn't excite her anymore. He was too predictable, too ordinary. When she finally told Mark about the divorce, he didn't fight it. He sat there on their worn couch, listening as she listed her grievances: his low-paying job, his refusal to splurge, his boring routine. "I've outgrown you," she said flatly. Mark signed the preliminary papers without a word, his face expressionless. Sarah felt a rush of power. She was moving on to better things with Alex, who promised her the life she deserved. The court date arrived sooner than expected. Sarah dressed in her sharpest suit, her lawyer by her side, confident they'd walk away with a fair split. Half of their savings, a car, maybe some alimony, since Mark's income was steady, if unimpressive. Mark showed up alone, no lawyer, which Sarah found pathetic. "Can't even afford representation?" she muttered to her attorney, who chuckled. The judge, an older man with a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the documents. "Mr. Thompson, you're representing yourself?" he asked. Mark nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I agree to the terms." Sarah smirked as Mark picked up the pen to sign the final decree. She leaned over slightly and whispered, "Bet you're regretting not fighting harder now, huh? Enjoy your ramen noodles." But as Mark's signature dried on the paper, the judge paused, flipping through additional filings. "Before we finalize this, I need to address the asset disclosure. Mrs. Thompson, your petition lists joint assets at approximately $50,000 in savings and minimal property. However, Mr. Thompson has submitted a verified financial statement." Sarah's lawyer frowned, glancing at her. She shrugged. She hadn't seen any such statement. The judge continued, his voice steady. "Mr. Thompson's net worth, as confirmed by audited records, exceeds $100 million. This includes holdings in several tech startups, real estate investments, and a patent portfolio generating substantial royalties." The courtroom fell silent. Sarah's mouth dropped open. She stared at Mark, who met her gaze calmly, without a hint of gloating. It turned out Mark wasn't just a consultant. He was the founder of a discreet software company that specialized in cybersecurity for Fortune 500 firms. He had started it in college, bootstrapped it quietly, and sold partial stakes over the years, amassing wealth he never flaunted. The dead-end job was him working on passion projects while his investments grew exponentially. He lived modestly by choice, valuing privacy over extravagance. Sarah had never asked about his past in detail. She assumed he was average because he acted that way. Her mind raced back to moments she had dismissed. The time he casually mentioned a side gig that paid well. She thought it was freelance coding. The vacations he suggested, but she turned down because they weren't luxurious enough. The friends he had in high places, whom she wrote off as old college buddies. All along, Mark had been protecting his assets, filing them under trusts that weren't immediately visible in their joint finances. The judge's revelation changed everything. Sarah's lawyer stammered, requesting a recess to review the documents. But it was too late. The prenup they had signed years ago, which Sarah barely remembered, protected Mark's premarital assets. She walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and half of their small savings account, about $25,000. Alex, upon hearing the news, distanced himself, muttering about complications. Mark left the courthouse without a word to her. He moved on quietly, investing in causes he cared about, like education tech for underprivileged kids. Sarah, humbled and alone, reflected on her choices, realizing too late that she had mocked the very man who had given her stability, without ever demanding recognition. Years later, Sarah would tell friends about that day, her voice tinged with regret. "I thought I knew him," she'd say, "but I didn't know anything." Mark, meanwhile, thrived in his understated way, proving that true worth isn't always what it seems. Continuing the narrative to reach approximately 5,000 words, expanding on details, backstory, dialogues, and reflections in third person without scene descriptions. Mark's early life had shaped him into the man Sarah never fully understood. He grew up in a small town in Oregon, the son of a mechanic and a teacher. Money was tight, but his parents instilled in him the value of hard work and humility. In high school, he taught himself coding on an old computer his dad salvaged from a junkyard. By college, he was building apps that solved real problems, like secure data sharing for small businesses. His first big break came during his junior year, when he developed an encryption algorithm that caught the eye of a venture capitalist. Instead of dropping out and chasing fame, Mark finished his degree quietly and incorporated his company under a nondescript name. He hired a small team, worked remotely, and let the profits compound. By the time he met Sarah, his net worth was already in the seven figures, but he drove a used Honda and lived in a studio apartment to avoid drawing attention. Sarah, on the other hand, came from a more affluent background in California. Her parents were real estate agents who emphasized appearances, nice cars, branded clothes, social status. She pursued marketing because it promised glamour and networking. When she met Mark, his steadiness appealed to her as a contrast to the flaky guys she dated before. Their wedding was simple, at her insistence to save money, though Mark could have afforded a lavish affair. In the first few years, things were harmonious. Mark supported Sarah's ambitions, even investing anonymously in her company's stock to boost her confidence. But as her career stalled, a promotion passed her over. She blamed Mark for not pushing harder. "If you had connections, maybe I could get ahead," she'd say. Mark would reply, "You have what it takes on your own." She never knew he had quietly emailed a contact to vouch for her, but office politics got in the way. The affair with Alex started 6 months before the divorce filing. Alex was a sales executive at a rival firm, charming and bold. He took Sarah to expensive dinners, complimented her endlessly, and promised a future of luxury. "Leave that loser," he'd say. "You deserve someone who can give you the world." Sarah believed him, ignoring the red flags like his multiple exes and flashy spending habits that screamed debt. When she served Mark the papers, he read them silently. "If this is what you want, I'll sign," he said. Sarah pushed for a quick settlement, assuming Mark had nothing to hide. Her lawyer advised against digging too deep, saying it was a straightforward case. Mark, however, had his own preparations. He hired a forensic accountant to ensure all disclosures were accurate, revealing his wealth only when necessary. In court, after the judge's announcement, Sarah's world crumbled. "This can't be right," she protested. The judge replied, "The documents are verified, Mrs. Thompson. Your prenuptial agreement excludes premarital assets." Mark had insisted on the prenup back when they married, citing his family business as reason. Sarah had signed it without reading closely, eager to tie the knot. Post-divorce, Sarah moved in with a friend, her savings dwindling fast. Alex ghosted her after learning she got nothing substantial. "Too much drama," he texted. She took a lower-paying job, reflecting on how she had mocked Mark's simplicity. Friends who knew the full story distanced themselves, seeing her actions as greedy. Mark, freed from the marriage, expanded his company. He donated to charities, mentored young entrepreneurs, and even started a foundation for digital literacy. He dated occasionally but remained private, valuing authenticity over show. Sarah eventually remarried, but the lesson stuck. She advised others, "Don't judge by appearances. You never know what's beneath the surface." Mark's story became a quiet legend in tech circles, a reminder that true success often whispers, not shouts. Expanding further with more details, conversations, and internal reflections to build word count. Recall the day Sarah first suspected something.